On a family cruise, my son publicly joked that I was the extra baggage. I proved that he wouldn't survive without my help. The gentle rocking of the cruise ship should have been soothing, but I couldn't stop my hands from trembling as I gripped the railing of my cabin's balcony. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, dark and vast against the fading sunset. Just like my thoughts. "It's just a joke, Mom. You're too sensitive." Benjamin's words echoed in my mind, cutting deeper with each repetition. Too sensitive. As if the problem was me, not the fact that my own son had humiliated me in front of everyone. The evening had started so beautifully. I'd worn my best dress, a navy blue number I'd splurged on after George died. "You need to start living again, Theresa," my friend Margaret had insisted. 3 years a widow, and I was still learning how. The cruise was supposedly Benjamin and Rachel's gift to celebrate my retirement after 30 years of teaching. "You deserve it, Mom," Benjamin had said when presenting me with the ticket. "It'll be great to have everyone together. You, me, Rachel, and the kids." How quickly that illusion shattered. It happened during dinner in the ship's grand hall. Crystal. Chandeliers sparkled overhead as waiters in crisp uniforms served platters of food I could barely afford on my teacher's pension. Benjamin ordered another bottle of champagne, his third of the night. Rachel kept glancing at her watch. My grandchildren, Emma and Jack, fidgeted in their formal wear. "A toast," Benjamin announced, rising with his glass. The conversation at nearby tables quieted. "To my mother, Theresa Parker, finally retired after decades of shaping young minds." I smiled, warmed by his acknowledgement. But then his tone shifted. "And to Rachel, for agreeing to bring Mom along as our extra baggage on this trip." He chuckled, swirling his champagne. "We've been carrying her since Dad died. Might as well bring her on vacation, too." Laughter rippled through the dining room. Rachel smirked behind her napkin. My face burned as I sat frozen, my champagne glass suspended halfway to my lips. Jack, only 8, looked confused. "Grandma's not baggage," he said loudly. Benjamin ruffled his son's hair. "It's just a joke, buddy." But it wasn't. I saw it in Rachel's eyes, in the way Benjamin's hand tightened around his glass. The truth had slipped out, loosened by alcohol, and the false confidence of being surrounded by strangers who would never see us again. I was baggage, a burden, an obligation. After dinner, I retreated to my cabin, claiming fatigue. The truth was I couldn't bear to smile through another minute of pretending we were a happy family. Now, alone on my balcony, I realized this joke was just the latest in a pattern I'd been ignoring. The way Benjamin and Rachel would exchange glances when I offered to watch the kids, how they'd sigh when I mentioned possibly moving closer to them after selling my house, their impatience when I couldn't immediately grasp the new phone they'd bought me to make communication easier. George would have never tolerated it. My husband had been the buffer between Benjamin's ambition and my unconditional love. Without him, the true nature of my relationship with my son was exposed, raw and painful. I wiped away a tear, angry at myself for crying. At 58, I was not helpless. I'd raised a son alone after my husband's early heart attack. I'd balanced grief with a full-time teaching career. I'd put Benjamin through medical school, working summer jobs and taking out a second mortgage. And now I was extra baggage. A knock at my cabin door startled me. I quickly dabbed at my eyes, not wanting anyone to see me like this. "Grandma?" Emma's voice called softly. "Are you okay?" I opened the door to find my 12-year-old granddaughter, still in her dinner dress, but with her formal shoes replaced by fluffy slippers. "Dad was mean," she said simply, her young face serious. "You're not baggage." I pulled her into a hug, inhaling the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Thank you, sweetheart." "Mom and Dad are fighting," she whispered. "About you and about other stuff. Dad's been really stressed about work." I nodded, unsurprised. Benjamin had always channeled pressure into sharp words. As I tucked Emma into the small sofa bed in my cabin, promising she could stay the night, I made a decision. This cruise would not end the way Benjamin expected. He thought I was baggage, dead weight to be tolerated. I would show him just how much he needed that weight to stay anchored. Little did I know what secrets waited to be uncovered, or how quickly. Benjamin's carefully constructed life would start to unravel once I stopped holding it together. Ridgeview Assisted Living has excellent reviews, Mrs. Parker. You'd love it there. The voice drifted through the thin wall separating my cabin from Benjamin and Rachel's. I froze mid-motion, the hairbrush suspended above my head. Mom would never agree to it, Benjamin replied, his voice low but clear. She's too proud. That's why we don't give her a choice, Rachel insisted. We sell her house while she's staying with us after the cruise, show her Ridgeview as a fait accompli. I pressed a hand against my mouth to stifle any sound that might escape. Emma was still asleep on the sofa bed, her breathing deep and even. And, tell her what? Benjamin sounded exasperated. Thanks for putting me through medical school. Now here's your retirement home? You act like we're abandoning her on an iceberg, Rachel hissed. It's a luxury facility. Besides, we agreed. Your promotion means more travel, we're renovating the house, and I can't handle her neediness and the kids. My neediness. The word struck like a physical blow. I sank onto the edge of my bed, legs suddenly weak. She's been hinting about moving into our neighborhood, Benjamin sighed. I can't deal with that, not with everything happening at the hospital. Through the wall, I heard Rachel's derisive snort. You mean your little HR problem? That would go away if you just apologized to Dr. Chen. I have nothing to apologize for. Benjamin's voice rose sharply before dropping again. She's targeting me because she's jealous. Everyone knows I deserve that department chair position. I sat motionless, my mind racing. What HR problem? What had my son done? Benjamin had always been competitive, driven to prove himself the best, but this sounded more serious. The conversation shifted to logistics, how to list my house, which of my belongings to keep, what to tell the grandchildren. They discussed my life as if I were already gone, a problem to be managed rather than a person to be consulted. I thought of all I'd given up for Benjamin. After George died, I'd declined a promotion to department head at my school because it would have meant less time available to help with baby Emma. When Benjamin and Rachel bought their first house, I emptied my savings for their down payment. Just last year, I'd spent every weekend for 3 months watching the children while they traveled for Rachel's sister's destination wedding events. My life had revolved around their needs for so long I'd forgotten it was supposed to be mine. Memory surfaced. Benjamin at 7, refusing to let me help with his science project. I can do it myself, Mom, he'd insisted, even as the solar system mobile collapsed around him. His determination had made me proud then. Now I recognized something darker in that stubborn independence. He'd accepted my help over the years, but always begrudgingly, always maintaining the fiction that he didn't really need it, that I was, indeed, extra baggage. The next morning, I found an excuse to visit Benjamin and Rachel's suite while they were at breakfast. Emma had left her favorite book in their room, I told the steward. Once inside, I spotted Benjamin's tablet on the bedside table. I hesitated only briefly before picking it up. The password was still the same, Jack's birthday. Some things never changed, including Benjamin's carelessness with security. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Emails from Benjamin's hospital HR department regarding a formal complaint. A female resident had accused him of taking credit for her research and making demeaning comments about her capabilities. When confronted, Benjamin had apparently dismissed the accusations as emotional overreactions. The hospital board was considering disciplinary action. No wonder he'd been drinking so heavily at dinner. I found more. A spreadsheet tracking their finances showed mounting debt. Designer furniture, private school tuition, 3 cars, and a renovation that was already 50% over budget. They were stretched thin, with multiple credit cards near their limits, and there, in a folder labeled Mom, was their plan for me. A brochure for Ridgeview, a draft letter to my landlord terminating my lease without my knowledge, a list of my possessions categorized into keep, sell, and donate. My hands trembled as I replaced the tablet exactly where I'd found it. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. When had I become so invisible to my own son? When had my value been reduced to what I could provide? Back in my cabin, I found Emma awake and reading. "Grandma, can we get hot chocolate from the cafe?" I smiled, pushing aside my turmoil. "Of course, sweetheart." As we walked along the deck, Emma's small hand in mine, I noticed Rachel watching the grandchildren swimming in the pool area. She was scrolling through her phone, barely glancing at Jack as he called repeatedly for her attention. "Mom says you might come stay with us after the cruise," Emma said suddenly. "She told Dad it would be better than paying for a hotel while they find you a permanent situation." Out of the mouths of babes. "Would you like that?" I asked carefully. Emma nodded enthusiastically. "You help me with homework way better than Mom and Dad. They're always too busy. Too busy for their children, but not too busy to plan my future without my consent." That evening, as I watched Benjamin charm fellow passengers at the captain's dinner, something hardened inside me. The hurt was still there, but now it was crystallizing into resolve. They thought I wouldn't survive without them? That I was dependent and needy? It was time to show Benjamin just how wrong he was, and exactly who would struggle to survive without whom. What I didn't yet realize was just how quickly his carefully constructed facade would crumble once I stepped away. I had spent years being his safety net, his contingency plan, his unpaid assistant and childcare provider. I had enabled his success while he dismissed my contributions. No more. The cruise would end in 3 days, and with it, Benjamin's illusion of independence. 2 weeks after the cruise, I sat in my quiet living room. My own living room, not the guest bedroom at Benjamin and Rachel's house where they'd expected me to stay temporarily. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, casting gentle shadows across the carpet George and I had chosen together decades ago. The silence felt different now. Before, it had been heavy with loneliness. Today, it felt like peace. When the ship docked, I'd surprised everyone by declining Benjamin's offer to stay with them. "I miss my own space," I'd said simply, watching confusion cross his face. He wasn't used to me refusing anything he suggested. "But Mom," he'd protested, "we thought you'd help with the kids while Rachel oversees the renovation." Of course they had. "I have some projects of my own to focus on," I replied, my voice gentle but firm. "But I'm happy to take the children for an occasional weekend." Rachel's eyebrows had shot up. "Occasional?" she echoed. "What about our standing Tuesday and Thursday arrangement?" There was no standing arrangement. There was only their assumption that my time belonged to them, to be claimed without asking. "I've enrolled in a watercolor class on Tuesdays," I explained, "and Thursdays I'm volunteering at the community center." These weren't impulsive decisions. During the last day of the cruise, while Benjamin networked with fellow doctors and Rachel shopped, I'd made phone calls. I'd researched. I'd reclaimed my calendar before they could fill it with their needs. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. "Benjamin, Mom, Jack's running a fever, and Rachel has that charity luncheon she can't miss. Could you come over?" In the past, I would have grabbed my purse and rushed out without hesitation. Today, I paused. "I'm sorry, honey. I have an appointment this afternoon." It wasn't a lie. I'd scheduled a meeting with my financial advisor to discuss the money I'd been planning to give Benjamin and Rachel for their renovation. An appointment? Benjamin sounded genuinely baffled. What kind of appointment? Personal, I replied, the unfamiliar boundary feeling both terrifying and exhilarating. Have you called Dr. Matthews' office? Jack might need antibiotics if it's that ear infection again. Rachel usually handles that, he muttered. I'm sure you'll figure it out, I said encouragingly. Let me know how he's feeling tonight. After hanging up, I sat with my hands trembling slightly. Saying no to Benjamin went against 3 decades of maternal instinct, but it also felt right. My financial advisor, Marion, had been blunt during our meeting that afternoon. Theresa, you've got to stop treating your retirement fund like their emergency account. At this rate, you'll be depending on them within 5 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were planning to put me in a home while simultaneously depleting the resources that could have kept me independent. No more loans, Marion had insisted. No more gifts for down payments or renovations. Your late husband's insurance was meant to secure your future, not bankroll your son's lifestyle. She was right. George would have been furious to see how Benjamin had come to treat me. That evening, Emma called, her voice small and worried. Grandma, Dad's really stressed. He keeps yelling at Mom, and Jack's still sick, and nobody made dinner. My heart clenched. Is Jack okay? He's watching iPad in his room. Dad's in his office with the door locked. This was the hardest part of my plan, knowing the children would feel the effects of my stepping back. But they would also suffer if I continued enabling Benjamin and Rachel's dysfunction. Would you like me to pick up some dinner for you all? I offered, finding a middle ground. Yes, please, Emma sounded relieved. When I arrived with bags of soup and sandwiches, the house was unnervingly quiet. Rachel met me at the door, her charity luncheon outfit replaced by yoga pants, her expression harried. Benjamin's having a crisis at work, she said without preamble. Some complaint has escalated to the board. I nodded, feigning ignorance. I brought dinner for everyone. Thank God, she muttered, taking the bags. The contractor called. The renovation is going to cost another $20,000. We were counting on your contribution. There it was, the financial expectation laid bare. I've actually decided to invest that money in some needed repairs for my own house, I said carefully. Rachel stared as if I'd announced plans to gamble it away in Las Vegas. But you promised, I said I'd consider it, I corrected gently. And I have. My financial advisor doesn't think it's a wise move for me right now. Her face hardened. Benjamin's not going to be happy. That's between Benjamin and his expectations, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Where are the children? I'd like to say hello before I go. You're not staying? Rachel couldn't hide her dismay. I have plans this evening. Another boundary, another small reclamation of my time. As I hugged my grandchildren goodbye, I spotted Benjamin through his office window, pacing while on the phone, his face flushed with anger. Whatever was happening at the hospital was escalating. Drove home feeling both guilty and liberated. For years, I'd been the safety valve for their pressure cooker of a household. Always available, always accommodating, always putting their needs first. Now they would have to learn to function without that relief. And I would have to learn to live with the knowledge that sometimes helping means stepping back, even when it hurts. What I didn't realize was how quickly things would unravel once I stopped holding everything together, or how soon Benjamin would be at my door, not with demands, but with desperation. The pounding on my front door started at 11:38 p.m., jolting me from sleep. My heart raced as I fumbled for my glasses and robe, memories of the night I'd been awakened to news of George's heart attack flooding back. Through the peephole, I saw Benjamin, disheveled, unshaven, nothing like the polished doctor who'd mockingly called me baggage 3 weeks earlier. I opened the door, and the scent of whiskey immediately hit me. Benjamin? What's wrong? He pushed past me into the living room, running his hands through his hair. Everything's falling apart, Mom. I turned on a lamp, casting soft light across his haggard face. My son looked like he'd aged years in weeks. "The hospital suspended me today," he said, collapsing onto the couch. "Pending investigation. That resident, Dr. Chen, she's turned everyone against me. Claims I stole her research, that I bullied her." His voice cracked. "My own colleagues are treating me like I'm poison." I sat across from him, keeping deliberate distance. "Did you do what she's accusing you of?" Benjamin's head snapped up, eyes flashing. "Whose side are you on?" "I'm on the side of truth," I replied calmly. "Did you take credit for her work?" He looked away. "It was a team project. I was the attending physician. Of course my name went first on the paper. And the bullying? I have high standards," he muttered. "If she can't handle constructive criticism, Benjamin." My tone stopped. Him short. It was the voice I'd used when he was a teenager caught in a lie. "What did you say to her?" His shoulders slumped. "I might have suggested she wasn't cut out for cardiology, that she should consider dermatology or something less demanding." Closed my eyes briefly. "Because she's a woman?" "Because she's too sensitive," he exploded, then immediately deflated. "But that's not even the worst part. Rachel's talking about separation. The revelation hung in the air between us. She says I'm impossible to live with lately, that I'm taking my stress out on her and the kids." He laughed bitterly. "She's the one who pushed for the renovation we can't afford. She's the one who insisted on private school tuition that drains our accounts every month." I thought of Rachel's designer clothes, her weekly salon appointments, her ladies' lunches. But I also thought of Benjamin's luxury car, his expensive watches, his golf club membership. They were two sides of the same coin, both living beyond their means while expecting me to fill the gaps. "And the children?" I asked quietly. Pain flashed across his face. "Jack had to go to urgent care yesterday. His ear infection got worse. I was supposed to pick up his antibiotics, but I forgot." He covered his face with his hands. "Emma won't even talk to me. Says I scare her when I yell." My heart ached for my grandchildren caught in the crossfire of adult failures. "Mom, I need your help," Benjamin said, his voice small. "Everything's falling apart, and I don't know how to fix it." There it was, the admission I'd been waiting for. Not baggage, after all, but a lifeline he desperately needed. I could have savored the moment, could have reminded him of his cruel words on the cruise, could have listed all the ways I'd supported him while he took me for granted. Instead, I asked, "What exactly do you need?" "Money," he admitted, eyes downcast. "The renovation is halfway done and we can't afford to finish it. The contractor's threatening to put a lien on the house. And I need somewhere to stay. Rachel asked me to move out for a while." "And?" I pressed. He looked confused. "And what?" "What else do you need, Benjamin? Because it sounds like money and a place to stay are just surface issues." He stared at me, uncomprehending. "When was the last time you really saw me?" I asked softly. "Not as a convenient babysitter or an ATM, but as your mother. As a person with my own life and feelings." His mouth opened, then closed. "On that cruise, you called me extra baggage. Do you remember that?" He winced. "I was drunk. It was a stupid joke." "It wasn't just a joke, though, was it? It was how you've seen me since your father died. As a burden, a responsibility, something to manage rather, than someone to respect." Tears filled his eyes. "Mom, I didn't—" "You did," I interrupted gently. "And worse, you and Rachel planned to sell my house and put me in assisted living without even discussing it with me." His head jerked up. "How did you—" "Thin walls on cruise ships," I said. "And Emma hears more than you realize." Benjamin buried, his face in his hands. "I'm so sorry." "I know you are," I replied, "but only because everything's falling apart. You're sorry you need me, Not sorry for how you've treated me. The harsh truth hung between us like a physical presence. Outside, rain began to patter against the windows, matching the tears now streaming down Benjamin's face. I don't know who I am anymore, he whispered. At work, I was respected. At home, I was in control. Now He trailed off. Human, I finished for him. Flawed, in need of help like everyone else. He looked up, his expression raw with vulnerability I hadn't seen since he was a child. I'll help you, I said finally, but not by enabling behaviors that hurt you and others in the long run. What does that mean? It means you can stay in my guest room, but we'll be setting some ground rules. It means I'll help with the children, but not at the expense of my own life. And it means no more money until you've gotten financial counseling and created a sustainable budget. I expected argument, resistance, the defensive pride that had characterized Benjamin for so long. Instead, he nodded slowly. And Benjamin, I added, my voice firmer, you need to make things right with Dr. Chen. A real apology. Full acknowledgement of what you did wrong. He stiffened. That could end my career. No, I countered. Your behavior could end your career. Taking responsibility might save it. The rain intensified outside, drumming against the roof as Benjamin struggled with truths he'd spent years avoiding. In his crumpled shirt and unshaven face, I could see glimpses of the little boy who'd once run to me for comfort after skinning. His knee, before he learned to hide his vulnerabilities behind arrogance. I don't deserve your help, he said finally. No, I agreed. But you need it, and despite everything, I love you. As Benjamin slept in my guest room that night, I sat awake in my kitchen, sipping tea and wondering if this crisis would truly change him, or if, once the storm passed, he would revert to seeing me as nothing more than extra baggage, useful only when needed, invisible when not. Only time would tell if the lesson would last. But something had fundamentally shifted between us. For the first time in years, Benjamin saw me. Really saw me. Not as an extension of himself or a resource to be used, but as a complete person with boundaries, wisdom, and the power to say, no. It was a beginning. A fragile one, but real. And in that quiet midnight moment, I finally understood that sometimes being strong means refusing to carry someone else's baggage, especially when they need to learn how to lighten their own load. 3. Weeks passed with Benjamin living in my guest room. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was exactly the arrangement Rachel and he had planned for me, but in reverse. We settled into an uneasy routine. Benjamin left early each morning for meetings with his lawyer and returned late, shoulders hunched, eyes shadowed. The hospital investigation continued. Rachel kept the children away initially, a silent punishment that hurt Benjamin more than he would admit. On the 18th day, I placed a cup of coffee in front of him at breakfast. We need to talk. He looked up, wariness crossing his face. About? Your plan. For moving forward. You can't live in my guest room forever, Benjamin. He stared into his coffee. I'm working on it. The lawyer thinks we might reach a settlement with Dr. Chen. And with Rachel? The children? His jaw tightened. Rachel's being unreasonable. Says she won't consider reconciliation until I've changed fundamentally. Whatever that means. I sat across from him, choosing my words carefully. It means she doesn't trust that this crisis has really affected you. She's waiting to see if you'll revert back to the person who took everyone for granted. I wasn't that bad, he protested. You were, I said gently. To her, to the children, to me. The silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken truths. You know, I continued, your father wasn't perfect, but he understood something you've forgotten. Benjamin looked up. What's that? That strength isn't about never needing help. It's about having the courage to ask for it, and the humility to accept it with gratitude. He winced. I haven't been very grateful, have I? No, I agreed. But you can learn. That afternoon, Benjamin received a call that the hospital was willing to negotiate terms for his return, contingent on a formal apology to Dr. Chen and sensitivity training. The relief on his face was palpable, until he realized what it would cost him. I have to admit I was wrong, he said, pacing my living room. Publicly. Yes, I replied. That's generally how apologies work. He shot me a look, then sighed. I'm scared, Mom. The admission, so naked and honest, caught me off guard. Benjamin hadn't confessed fear to me since he was a child. Of what? I asked. That I'll never get my life back. That Rachel won't forgive me. That the children will always remember me as the father who yelled and forgot to pick up medicine. His voice broke. That I'll look weak. I moved to sit beside him on the sofa. Maybe your old life isn't worth getting back. He stared at me. The life where you were constantly stressed, where you belittled others to feel powerful, where you treated your family as accessories to your success rather than partners in it. I touched his hand. Maybe it's time to build something different. The next day, Benjamin met Dr. Chen at a neutral location suggested by the hospital mediator. He returned looking exhausted but somehow lighter. How did it go? I asked. Harder than any surgery I've ever performed, he admitted. She cried, Mom. I didn't realize how badly I'd hurt her. I nodded, waiting. She's brilliant, you know. Her research was groundbreaking, and He swallowed hard. I was jealous, threatened. So I did exactly what Dad always warned me not to. I pushed someone else down to lift myself up. The self-awareness surprised me. For the first time, I saw genuine remorse, not just regret for being caught. She accepted my apology, he continued. Said she never wanted to ruin my career, just to be acknowledged for her work. And the hospital? 6-month probation, weekly meetings with a mentor, and I have to take a leadership course focused on creating inclusive environments. He ran a hand through his hair. It's fair. More than fair. I squeezed his shoulder, unexpectedly proud. And Rachel? His expression fell. That's complicated. She's agreed to family counseling, but she's not ready for me to move back home. One step at a time, I encouraged. That evening, Rachel brought the children for dinner. The atmosphere was tense but civil. Emma watched her parents with cautious hope, while Jack simply seemed relieved to have his father's attention again. After the children were settled in front of a movie, Rachel pulled me aside in the kitchen. I wanted to thank you, she said stiffly. For not enabling him this time. I raised an eyebrow. Is that what you think I've been doing all these years? She had the grace to look embarrassed. Partly, but I also know we've taken advantage of your generosity. She fidgeted with her wedding ring. And I'm sorry about the assisted living plan. It was wrong. The apology surprised me. Thank you for saying that. Benjamin told me everything. How you confronted him about his behavior toward me and the kids. How you refused to bail us out financially until we got counseling. She sighed. You could have just let him crash and burn. Most mothers would have, after how he treated you. I don't want my son to fail, I said simply. I just want him to succeed on his own merits, not at others' expense. Rachel nodded slowly. He's different, since staying here, less entitled. He's remembering who he was before status and money became his measuring sticks. Later, as I watched, Benjamin helped Jack with his homework, patiently explaining math concepts instead of growing frustrated with the boy's questions. I felt a cautious hope unfurling. The changes were small but significant, like seedlings after a harsh winter, fragile but alive. That night, I sat on my porch swing, watching fireflies blink in the gathering dusk. For years, I'd defined myself by what I gave to others, especially Benjamin. My identity had been so wrapped up in being his support system that I'd forgotten how to exist independently. Now, paradoxically, by refusing to be baggage, I'd found my true weight. My value wasn't in what I provided, but in who I was, a woman with boundaries, wisdom, and her own path to walk. The next morning, I made a decision that would test just how much Benjamin had really changed. Over breakfast, I told him about the opportunity that had come my way, an invitation from my old teaching colleague to join a 2-month educational tour of Europe. I've always wanted to see Venice, I explained, watching his face carefully. And Paris. All those places your father and I plan to visit someday. Benjamin was quiet for a long moment. The old Benjamin would have immediately calculated how my absence would inconvenience him, who would watch the children, how would he manage without my helping hand. Instead, he asked, "When would you leave?" 3 weeks from now, if I decide to go. He nodded slowly. You should do it, Mom. You've put your life on hold long enough. The words were right, but I needed to be sure they weren't just for show. It would mean changes for you, for Rachel, for the children. We'll figure it out, he said, and for the first time in years, I believed him. 1 year later, I stood in my new kitchen, morning sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked a garden rather than a parking lot. The apartment was smaller than my old house, cozier, more manageable, and entirely mine. Photographs lined the walls, Emma and Jack beaming at their school concerts, Benjamin and Rachel renewing their vows on their 15th anniversary, and me, standing beside the canals of Venice, smiling into the camera with a freedom I hadn't felt in decades. The European tour had changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. For 8 weeks, I'd been neither mother nor grandmother, neither supporter nor caretaker, just Theresa, a woman discovering parts of herself long buried under family obligations. I'd sketched the Tuscan countryside, danced with strangers at a Parisian cafe, and stood in silent awe before Michelangelo's David. And while I traveled, Benjamin had faced his own journey, the harder one of rebuilding what his pride had nearly destroyed. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Benjamin stood outside carrying a small wrapped package. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, kissing my cheek as he entered. "You remembered." His expression softened. "I've been trying to remember a lot of things this year." We settled in the living room with coffee. Benjamin looked different now. The sharp edges softened. The constant tension in his shoulders eased. The hospital had reinstated him fully 6 months ago, though not as department chair. That position had gone to Dr. Chen, with Benjamin serving as her deputy, an arrangement that surprisingly worked well for both of them. "How are the sessions going?" I asked. "Good. The therapist says we're making real progress." He smiled wryly. "Though she also says I have a lifetime of patterns to unlearn." Rachel and Benjamin had been in counseling for nearly 10 months, first separately, then together. Their reconciliation hadn't been immediate or easy, but it had been genuine. I'd watched with cautious optimism as they rebuilt their relationship on a foundation of honesty rather than appearances. And the children? Emma just got accepted into that summer science program she wanted, and Jack's baseball team is heading to regionals. Pride shone in his eyes. Not the possessive pride of a man viewing his children as extensions of himself, but the genuine joy of a father celebrating their individual journeys. "Rachel mentioned you've been handling the carpooling yourself these days." He nodded. "We worked out a schedule. No more dumping everything on her while I claim work emergencies. And—" He glanced away, a hint of embarrassment crossing his face. "We've started financial counseling. Sold the vacation timeshare, downsized to 1 car." I couldn't help but smile. "That must have been hard for you." "Humbling," he admitted, "but also freeing. We're not drowning in debt anymore." He pushed the wrapped package toward me. "This isn't much, but—" I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a hand-carved wooden frame containing a photograph I'd never seen before. Benjamin and me on the cruise ship, both smiling in the sunlight, before the joke that had changed everything. I had it in my phone, he explained. Took it that first day when we were both still trying. I touched the frame gently. It's beautiful. I've been thinking about that cruise a lot, he said, his voice quieter now. About what I said. About who I was then. We've both changed. Since then, I offered. He shook his head. You just finally stood up for yourself. I'm the one who needed to change. The simple acknowledgement warmed me more than any expensive gift could have. Rachel and I want you to come for dinner tonight, he continued. Nothing fancy, just family. The kids made you cards. I'd like that. Later, as I prepared to leave, for Benjamin's house, I paused before the mirror in my hallway. The woman reflected back at me was different from the one who had trembled on a cruise ship balcony a year ago, fighting back tears after being called baggage. This woman stood straighter. Her eyes held a quiet confidence born of setting boundaries, and watching them respected, of loving without depleting herself, of saying no when necessary and yes when genuine. Benjamin and Rachel's house felt different too when I arrived. Gone were many of the expensive furnishings that had strained their finances. In their place was something more valuable, a sense of peace. Emma rushed to hug me, chattering about her science project. Jack proudly showed me his latest baseball trophy. Rachel, more relaxed than I'd seen her in years, asked about my community center volunteer work, without the edge of judgment that once would have accompanied her questions. And Benjamin, my son, moved through his home with a new presence, attentive to his family's needs without the impatient distraction that had once characterized his interactions. After dinner, when the children were occupied with dessert, Benjamin raised his glass. I'd like to make a toast, he said. My stomach tightened reflexively, the memory of his cruel toast on the cruise ship flashing through my mind. Benjamin seemed to read my thoughts. Not like before, he said softly. Never like that again. He turned to address everyone at the table. To Mom, who taught me the hardest lesson of my life this year, that true strength isn't about refusing help or controlling others, but about having the courage to face your own failings. Rachel reached over to squeeze my hand. Emma and Jack clinked their juice glasses against mine. You could have given up on me, Benjamin continued, his voice thick with emotion. You had every right to. Instead, you showed me what real love looks like. Not enabling, not rescuing, but believing someone can be better even when they're at their worst. Tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't tears of hurt this time. I used to think I was carrying you, he admitted. I was too blind to see you were the one keeping all of us afloat. After the celebration, as Benjamin walked me to my car, the night air warm and sweet with the scent of jasmine, he asked me something I hadn't expected. Are you happy, Mom? Really happy? I considered the question seriously. Yes. Different than before, but yes. I worried that setting boundaries with us might leave you lonely. I smiled, touched by the concern that would never have occurred to the Benjamin of a year ago. I'm more connected now, to myself, to friends, to you, than when I was constantly available but never really seen. He nodded slowly. I understand that now. As I drove home to my apartment, I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed since that cruel joke on the cruise ship. Benjamin had called me baggage then, an unwanted burden to be tolerated out of obligation. The irony was that by refusing to be treated as baggage, I'd shown him just how much weight I truly carried in our family's life. Not as a servant or an ATM or a convenient babysitter, but as the foundation that had allowed him to build his success. More importantly, I'd discovered my own capacity for change. At 59, I was traveling, making new friends, pursuing interests long set aside. I'd learned that it's never too late to reclaim your worth, to insist on being valued not for what you give, but for who you are. In my living room that night, I added Benjamin's framed photo to my collection. Not because it represented a perfect moment, but because it marked the beginning of a journey neither of us could have anticipated. Sometimes life's harshest moments become unexpected gifts. Benjamin's cruel joke had wounded me deeply, but it had also cracked open a truth I'd been avoiding for years, that I'd allowed myself to become defined solely by what I could provide to others. Now I understood that my value didn't lie in being needed. It lived in being authentically myself, with all my strengths, weaknesses, boundaries, and dreams. Standing in my peaceful apartment, surrounded by mementos of both past and future adventures, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: the lightness of being precisely where I belonged, not extra baggage on someone else's journey, but the heroine of my own unfolding story. The joke had been cruel, but the freedom it eventually brought was anything but.